everyone, this is Addicon Podfic, back another podfic. Today I'll be reading The Storm That Unfolded by Raina's Falling 13. This will be Chapter 12, A Spriteful Insight. Summary. Percy can feel the eyes that linger on him still, and the wariness that follows their gaze. He understands why it's there, but he can't ignore it anymore. He waits for the confrontation to come, but it's the internal pressure, the gentle and curious questions put on him that might be what gets him first. Now let's get right into it. Percy didn't need to look around to know he was being watched again. He could feel it, this pressure, and though it was subtle, it was constant. It didn't feel quite hostile, which was a plenty familiar feeling, so he assumed it had to be either his colleagues, the students, or even potentially a curious third party. He exhaled slowly, letting the air curl out of his lungs with mist. Nothing felt out of place, per se, but there was that lingering sensation that had kept him alive this long for a reason, so he didn't trust the apparent peaceful facade. Something was up. 3 weeks, give or take, had given him long enough to memorize the layout of the school, the rhythm of the students, the silence that followed in the wake of certain individuals. It was long enough to catalog who stared too long and who looked away too quickly. Paranoia, some would say, or PTSD, but those didn't keep you alive on their own. No, it was instinct that told him when to move, when to disappear, instinct honed by too many years of being prey. He could no longer pretend to ignore it, though, and though he was hesitant to use the sprites around these people who were already rather wary of him, the feeling was really getting to him. Percy sat up and rubbed his hand over his tired eyes. He glanced at the cup of water beside him on the ledge he sat on, and after a moment's hesitation, clicked his tongue quietly, and a ripple shivered over its surface. It became 5 tiny sprites, mere wisps of water with so little cursed energy he hoped no one would notice them. "Go find out who's watching me," he murmured. The sprite dipped its head and vanished in a hush. He waited, outwardly relaxed, sitting on the stone edge with one leg drawn up, arms loosely folded across his knee. A moment passed, then another, then a tugging sensation started, telling him one of them had found something of interest. He closed his eyes and reached out, finding the one that was calling him, and coiling around it so as to see what it could. A window filled his mind's eye, a boy with dark hair standing stiffly at an open door. He recognized Megumi immediately, as well as the person he was talking to. Nanami had his arms crossed, head tilted slightly in the way Percy had come to associate with cool reservation. He only caught some of the words they murmured, lost through the glass and wary of moving closer, but from what he did catch, it seemed their concern surrounding him and his lack of real identity was becoming more vocal. Percy clenched his jaw, rubbing tiredly at his eyes. He wasn't angry at them exactly, because he knew he could easily understand why they might be wary of him. He wasn't surprised, either. In lines of work like this, you needed to know who was surrounding yourself with. It wasn't their fault Percy wasn't volunteering any information, but neither was it Percy's, really. He was still figuring it out himself, how he fit in with all this. Part of him wanted to come right out and say it, ask those tough questions, force him to spit out an answer. The other, more rational part was terrified of that happening. He'd been here 3 weeks now, and they hadn't really asked him any pressing questions he would have asked himself if he were them. So, this was worse, because silence meant something was probably brewing, and it might explode if he didn't come forward with something first. He definitely needed to put this at its highest priority right now. He knew Nanami might not quite confront him directly, and might not even confront him at all, but with the safety of children involved, Percy doubted it. Gojo might be able to quell their concerns for now, but there's only so much faith you can put in another's faith if your own isn't felt. And Gojo had an advantage the others didn't by being far magically stronger than any of them. The others, and especially the kids, didn't have that luxury around such an unknown factor. He knew at some point something would happen that would make them realize how powerful Percy really was, how much of a danger he could pose. On that day, he knew there would be questions, deep, probing questions that demanded answers, because lives were at stake. Children were involved, and if nothing else, Nanami was sure to put himself in front of his students if he thought Percy was a threat to them. Percy massaged away the forming headache. He could confront them himself later, on his own terms. Pull the curtain back an inch, let them see what they wanted, but that didn't sit right, as much as sitting and waiting didn't either. He stood up, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. He looked once toward the building, toward the window where they'd stood, talking about him. "Fine," he muttered. "If they won't come to me," he let the thought trail off. He needed to find answers to their questions before they were going to be asked, and they were going to be asked. He knew that. It was only a matter of time. The sun was low, bleeding gold through the cracked windows of the old training hall. Dust danced lazily in the beams of light, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and sweat, though it wasn't necessarily unpleasant. Percy stood opposite Yuji, bare feet planted on the scuffed wooden floor. They were mid-spar, the rhythm smooth now. Yuji was fast, really fast. and persistent in the way only a teenager with something to prove could be. Percy couldn't help the reminiscent smile that crawled across his face at the thought. "Again," Yuji said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Percy nodded, adjusting his stance. This time, he let Yuji come at him full force. A flurry of movement, sharp elbow, low sweep, a feint, and Percy shifted just slightly, catching Yuji's momentum and twisting it away. Not throwing him, not really, but redirecting him with such precision that Yuji landed harmlessly on his feet a few steps away, blinking. "Okay," Yuji huffed, wiping sweat off his forehead with the sleeve of his uniform. "What was that?" Percy rolled his shoulders. "Aikido," he said, kind of. "I've never seen Aikido like that," Nobara cut in, where she was lounging nearby with a bottle of water pressed to her cheek. "Seriously, where'd you learn that?" Megumi, seated cross-legged near the wall, glanced up at that, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Gojo always says anticipation is the most important part of close combat," Megumi said evenly. "That was more than anticipation. You adjusted mid-movement." Percy forced himself to relax. It wasn't a question, just a fair observation. So, casually, he lifted a brow. "Fast reflexes help." Megumi's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk. "Reflexes don't predict foot placement." Yuji blinked between them, then threw himself into a dramatic spin. "Okay, but seriously, I've been learning from Gojo-sensei for months, and I can barely land a hit unless he lets me. Percy, how long have you been training?" Percy hesitated. "Not long enough. Too long. Since I was a kid." "Like, little kid? Nobara asked, cocking her head. "My dad's side of the family was rather, traditional. Taught me the basics. After that, it was mostly trial and error. You learned or you died." Yuji's expression turned puzzled. "I thought you were adopted." Percy gave an exaggerated nod. "After my family all died when I was 17, I was alone. My mom saved my life then, and she adopted me not long after that." The room went quiet for a beat. That was a piece of Percy's past they hadn't known about. "Wait," Yuji said slowly, pushing himself up on his elbows. "All of them died, but you didn't." Percy shrugged one shoulder, eyes flicking to the side. "We were attacked. I don't really want to talk about it." Megumi, ever practical, shifted the mood. "Your technique's too precise for someone who learned on instinct alone, but that kind of loss usually leaves a mark. I can see it in how you fight." Percy gave a short, wry laugh. "Turns out desperation's a decent teacher." "That's awful," Yuji muttered. "Kind of bleak," Nobara added. Then she tilted her head, studying him. "But it explains a lot. You fight like someone who had to, and the water stuff. Where's that from? Not cursed energy, right?" Percy hesitated. "No, maybe, I don't know. It's not exactly cursed energy," he said slowly. "It's something else." Megumi raised a brow. "Something else?" Percy looked at him carefully. "I wasn't trained the way you were. What I use, it's not quite jujutsu, but it works." Nobara crossed her arms. "So it's not a technique." Percy rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "They're just curious," he tried to convince himself. "Not really," he said, more of a question than anything certain. "To be honest, I don't really understand it myself, with the boundaries you work with, that is." Yuji blinked. "Wait, so you just, figured it out yourself?" Percy shrugged. "I learned to listen to the world. Water's everywhere. It helps." That made Megumi still. His gaze lingered on Percy for a long moment, then shifted away. Not distrustful, just thoughtful, maybe even unsure. "Maybe," he said slowly, "but Gojo has said we shouldn't just blindly listen to someone else. Only we can have our best interests at heart, and even other sorcerers don't like us whether we're working to the same goal or not. In a world like this, faith in yourself is the only thing that keeps you standing. No one else is coming to save you." "Well, maybe that's the problem," Percy replied, more sharply than he intended. "As far as I know, Gojo's never been dropped alone in an alien place surrounded by things he doesn't understand that only want to make him suffer before they eat him. I have, 5 times. He might not have had the best childhood, but at least he was around people like him in some way, people who could explain what was happening, who gave him an opportunity to fight his way to the top. All I've ever had was the water. She's the only thing that ever wanted to use me. That's never wanted to use me. That's only ever helped me. That's never led me astray, even before I knew who she was. So, yes, I listen for her, and I trust her implicitly." The air in the room cooled by a fraction. He sighed. "Sorry, that was uncalled for." "No," Megumi said after a pause. "It was honest." Yuji scratched his cheek. "But your fighting has been entirely self-taught. That's insane." "Well, I mean, I had people teach me. They just weren't sorcerers." He needed to move the conversation now, though, before he ran out of things to say about this. He glanced between them, tone lingering. "What about you 3? How long have you been doing this?" Yuji sat up straighter. "Oh, since, nearly a year ago?" "Itadori ate a cursed object," Megumi deadpanned. "After I was told not to," Yuji added helpfully. "But it worked out!" "Debatable," Megumi muttered. Percy laughed. "That explains a lot." Nobara took a long sip from a water bottle. I got scouted from the countryside. Apparently I had promise. She made air quotes with one hand, looking unimpressed. Now I deal with lame curses and a teacher who won't shut up. That sounds accurate, Percy said. You like him? Gojo-sensei? Yuji perked up. He's awesome. He's exhausting, Megumi corrected. He's an idiot, Nobara added. Percy choked on a laugh. Well, consensus achieved. They all grinned, and for a moment the tension of the earlier questions faded into something warmer. Percy leaned against the wall, watching the way the sunlight caught on dust and sweat and the glint of amused eyes. This is nice, he said after a beat. I hadn't realized how much I missed fighting without someone trying to kill you until I came back here. Low bar, Nobara muttered. We seem to bond through trauma and extracurricular violence. Here, Yuji said, a little too cheerfully. Percy let out a short laugh. Honestly, I'd forgotten what that felt like. He watched them, quiet for a moment, as he reminisced of his childhood and all his friends that had since died. I thought everyone like me was gone. Yuji must have seen the wistful look on his face, because he spoke then. You mean your family? You said they died. He cut himself off, wincing. Sorry, you must have been lonely then. Percy shrugged. I got used to it. Nobara was looking at him now, brows slightly furrowed. You shouldn't have to get used to it. No, you shouldn't, he hummed consideringly. Your job is dangerous, which is why you need to get better. Now, break time's over. Let's go again. They all groaned in unison, but did pull themselves back onto the mat, if a little dramatically. There was a growing nervousness that had been filling him since he caught a glimpse of Nanami peering through the gap in the door to the training room they had been gathered in. He hadn't stayed there for the rest of Percy's lesson with the kids, but his appearance alone told Percy enough. So, after training, he didn't head to the cafeteria with the kids. He begged off, citing a need to shower, but he wasn't sure that had fooled anyone. Megumi had glanced at him a little longer than necessary, and Yuji had opened his mouth to say something before Nobara jabbed him in the ribs and dragged him off. Still, Percy didn't go to the showers. Instead, he found himself moving down a lesser-used hallway, legs on autopilot, until the sound of quiet footsteps brought him back to himself. Nanami stood by the open walkway that overlooked the inner courtyard, arms crossed, his posture relaxed but unmistakably alert. Hayashi, he said, without turning, walk with me. Not a request, but not a command either. Percy knew he could say no, could walk away, and Nanami wouldn't throw hands over the disrespect, but he paused instead, and then fell into step with the elder sorcerer. They walked in silence for a stretch, the corridor curved gently, lanterns casting warm pools of light on polished wood. Thank you for your efforts with the students, Nanami said at last. I understand you've been assisting in their training. Percy blinked, then the opening surprised him. I try not to get in the way. That's not what they've said. He tilted his head. Oh? They've mentioned your advice, the way you demonstrate, how you push them to think differently. Nanami's voice was level, not unkind. Yuji especially seems to admire you. Percy didn't quite know how to respond to that. They're easy to like. Nanami made an agreeable sound, followed by another pause. You've been with us for over 4 weeks now, Nanami said. I imagine this isn't where you expected to end up. Percy gave a short breath of a laugh. Not even close. Nanami didn't smile, but Percy caught the faint crease in his brow relax. May I ask where you learned to fight? Nanami said, and it came so smoothly that it took Percy a moment to realize it was the first real question. No one place in particular, he said carefully. Mostly, a few people here and there showed me things, but it was trial and error for the most part. Nanami nodded once, as if that was a reasonable answer. That would be consistent with what little we've observed. Your movements aren't rooted in traditional jujutsu forms, though they borrow from them. There's also improvisation. Percy glanced sideways. You make that sound like a flaw. Not at all. In fact, it's likely what's kept you alive this long. They came to a stop at the edge of another quiet hall. Percy leaned against the railing, letting the cool evening air slide over his skin. Nanami stayed standing. The first record of your presence in Japan is your adoption certificate over 7 years ago, Nanami continued. On an island that, coincidentally, saw a marked decrease in curse activity during that same period, until the day a special grade appeared, the first report of a curse there in years. Percy didn't speak. He watched the wind ripple the trees across the courtyard. Saying anything to someone as smart as Nanami could only implicate him. I'm not here to interrogate you, Nanami said after a beat. I have no interest in pushing you for answers you're not ready to give, but the students are involved now. My responsibility is to them. Percy felt something in his chest shift. Not guilt, exactly. Something closer to understanding. You think I'm dangerous? I think you're capable. That's not the same thing. Percy looked down at his hands, flexed his fingers once. I didn't come here to make trouble. I was trying to keep my head down. You pulled me out. I know. There was no judgment in Nanami's voice, just calm observation. It made it harder to brush off, affecting Percy more than he wanted to admit. I don't know what you want from me, he said finally. Nanami studied him for a long moment. Perspective. That's all. Not background checks, secret life. We've been tempted, but Gojo-sensei is vouching for you, so you get the benefit of his doubt. Percy blinked. Comforting. I'm not your enemy, Hayashi, but I do need to know what kind of man you are. The students will look to you whether you want them to or not. Percy nodded slowly. I'm not looking to hurt anyone. That's the best I've got right now. That's enough, for now. Nanami turned then, walking a few paces before pausing. There was a time I stepped away from this world. When I returned, it took effort to understand where I fit, or if I should fit at all. If you're trying to answer the same question, you might find the archive's civil records useful. Most go unused, but there, well, you'll see how the system was shaped. Not just its techniques, but the assumptions that built it. That tends to tell you more than the textbooks do. Percy didn't answer right away, trying to read the intent behind the offer, suspicious of the guilt without strings. After a moment, though, he realized that this time, at least, there weren't any. Not yet. Thanks, I'll check 'em out, he said quietly. Nanami inclined his head once. Good night. And just like that, he was gone. No drama, no argument to judgment, just a quiet assurance and an offer Percy hadn't realized he wanted. He lingered by the railing a while longer, letting the night settle around him. Perspective. They hadn't got much of that yet, he admitted, and he knew he had to start soon. He stood there for longer than he intended, staring at the courtyard until his thoughts started to settle. But even as his body unwound the tension lining his shoulders, a knot formed somewhere deeper. He'd have to keep answering questions, and the more he revealed, the more questions there would be. He didn't know how long he could keep the truth buried, and at what point they would become hostile. He knew what kind of culture, He knew what kind of culture being in danger all the time fostered, how much paranoia and suspicions could flourish, how knives could end up in backs at the smallest sign of something was going on. What would they think? What would they say when they found out? And that pressure, internal, gnawing, a weight that didn't leave, grew larger than the quiet air could contain. As Percy finally pushed himself off the railing and turned toward the spare room, he felt that pressure rise from a quiet, persistent hum in the back of his mind to something that roared loudly in his ears. It wasn't the kind of thing you could forget about, and it would only get louder from here. And that is the end of, what is this, chapter 12? Yeah, that is the end of chapter 12. I hope you all enjoyed. And let's see, what do I have to yap about this time? A couple things, actually. So, in one of my classes, I've got Microsoft. I think I've mentioned it before. Basically, I'm learning Microsoft, like how to use it and stuff. And I keep failing my stupid Microsoft Excel exam. I've taken it 3 times. I have failed all 3 times. The last 2 times I failed, I got a score that was 10 points apart. And like 70 to, like, I think the second time because I need 700 points to pass. It's 1,000 out of 1,000, but you only need 700 to pass. The first time I took it, I was like halfway through the course. I was taking it just to take it, so I wasn't too mad about failing at that time. I got like 350, so about half of what I needed. Then the second time I took it, I got 630. And then the third time I took it, I got 640. I am mad. I'm going to take another one tomorrow, and then that's going to be the last one I can take because the semester's almost over. And so Monday is my last chance to pass this stupid exam before the semester ends. And it sucks. Because I was finally beating because I have a classmate who's like, he is the best at everything. Specifically, he is the best at every academic thing that there can possibly be in the entire freaking world. At least that's what it feels like half the time. And I was actually doing better than him in this class for a while. I had gotten I passed the word exam with a higher point thing than he did because he like just barely passed it with like 709 and I passed it with like 790. So I was doing better than him. And then my Chromebook my freaking computer stopped working for a month and I couldn't get anything done. And so then I was a month behind, and now he has passed the Excel and the PowerPoint along with the Word. So now he's got all 3, and I am just trying to scramble to get the Excel one done, and it is just so frustrating. I thought I was finally doing better than him in something, but no, of course not. Anyway, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, like all of my classes have been going awful. So, like there were like 2 days in a row where I almost cried during Spanish And then I did cry after Microsoft because I failed the exam. And then science is just kind of basic. And then math, I almost cried after math because I was frustrated. And then my freaking trumpet in band hasn't been letting me play high notes for the last like couple days, which sucks because I am the only trumpet who knows all of our stuff. I am the only one, and my trumpet has not been working. I swear to God, I might have to disown her. Anyway, I hope you'll have a good night or day wherever you are. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm sorry for the more aggressive rant this time instead of cool stuff I've been doing. But, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!